Morning, Francis. Morning, Savina. Let's start. Okay, great. Thanks for joining, and sorry for a bit of delay, simply because I wanted to have a quick tea break. So I hope it's not put off a lot of learners, and they should be able to join. So today we are going to be looking at, discussing um, a topic that we had already covered, in detail yesterday, but slight bit of variation in terms of what we discussed with regards to percentages. So here, today's topic that we're going to look at, it's a brief one, but the idea is to try and understand how do we work out, amounts and express them as percentages in particular. So basically looking at percentages and amounts. So if I say 40%, 51%, you are, say, for example, 80% almost there. So what we want to be able to do is be able to understand when we use these percentages to describe amounts, how do we deduct the amounts when we are talking in terms of percentages in particular. So here, the main part of the session that we want to look at today is to understand how can we look at calculating percentages of an amount. Right? Sometimes you say that I bought vegetables from the market, and or I bought, say, for example, oranges or pomegranates from the market, and 70% of them were bad. So you want to calculate how many did you buy and what percentage of that was actually, when you refer it in percentage, what was the quantity or the amount that you actually bought. And that is what the whole aim of the session today is. So we need to be able to use, you can use a calculator, but I will show you obviously manually how you are able to calculate percentages and then deduce the amount, from that side, by using these, formula. Now, when we do talk about percentages, we are basically talking about percentage as a fraction of 100. Because when we talk about 100%, or when we talk about 1% or 2%, you're essentially talking in percentages. And when we do talk in percentages, we use one symbol in particular. And that symbol in particular is called the percentage symbol. So when we talk about percentages, and if how would you get a clue that somebody is talking in percentages, is that when you look at, let's say, when you see visually that, that somebody has used a percentage, sign or a percentage symbol. So when we do talk about amounts, volume, quantity, and sometimes we talk about them in the case of percentage or percent, that means part of 100. Then in such cases, what you are looking at using is a symbol which is essentially called the percentage symbol. This is the percentage symbol, which means out of. Now, in order for us to understand percentages and express them as a number, we have to use it as a fraction of 100. The word percent actually comes from a Latin, phrase which basically is per centum, which means by the hundred, and it is represented by this symbol, which is what I've highlighted on this slide, which is percentage. Now, Understanding percentage is important because we use this in our day-to-day lives, and typically you would use this. If I were to ask a question to you, where do you use percentages? In day-to-day life, can you think of any examples? Any ideas? So where do we use percentages in our day-to-day life, or for example, in business transactions? So if I give you one or two examples that I'm pretty sure you'll be able to correlate with. So when we do shopping, or when we go and say, for example, I'm going to go and get my car serviced. So when I ask the dealership, they're going to give me, for example, they're going to say, okay, it's the major service. It's going to cost you about 1,200 pounds, or 1,000 pounds. Now, in such cases, what I would basically go to the dealership and then obviously say, are there any discounts? They would say, okay, you need to replace your brake pads, we need to replace your brake disc, or filters need to be changed, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, what's running through your mind is it's a heavy cost that I'm going to incur. Let me ask for a bit of discount. So what you do is you ask for a discount. And what will happen essentially is when you're shopping and when you're asking for discounts, you're going to ask for that in the case of percentage. Like sometimes we have learners who ask for discount on fees, and what we do is we say, okay, if you're paying your fees in full, we can offer you a cash discount. Now, cash discount is primarily going to be a percentage of the whole fees, or the amount that you're spending on for example, your car repairs, your car service, or when you're buying something from the market. So one such practical day-to-day example of percentages that we use is basically asking for shopping and discounts. For example, you go to a retail store and you go to Boxing Day sale. For example, we go and do shopping in Trafford or Arndale or any other, shopping center in Manchester, just as an example. You'll always see that there's a 10% sale off, or buy one get one free, or 20% off, or during Boxing Day sometimes you even get 50% off. Now, what that is actually telling you, 50% off, okay, that's good, 50% off, but what is the price of the product? You want to find out what is it that they're giving 50% on. Now, you never see these price discounts or percentages of discounts on an item like gold, jewelry, expensive watches. They never advertise that. So for example, have you ever heard of a discount being announced by Rolex or Omega or Tag Heuer or Breitling as watches? No. If you go to, say, car dealerships, when you're buying a car, they say we'll put down a dealer contribution of 1,500 pounds. But what you want to know is what is that percentage as a discount being offered on that. Now, 1,500 pound is fine that you're putting it as a dealer contribution if you're buying the finance car on finance. But if you decide to buy a Lamborghini, or if you're buying an expensive car like a Mercedes or an Audi, and the car is costing 55, 60,000, 1,500 pounds on that would be, what percentage? That is what will run through your mind. So on a daily basis, what we look at is when we do shopping, when we do ask for discounts, we are actually thinking about percentages in particular. Now, what are the other ways in which you can look at using percentages? The other way in which we look at using percentages is a practical example that I'll give you is you're going to book a holiday. You're going to book a holiday for this summer, and what you're looking at is budgeting and what would be the expenses that you would have on the holiday, like your flight tickets, your hotel stay, your meals, and maybe a bit of shopping that you would need to do before you go on a holiday. So again, what you're going to be looking at is looking at talking about percentages, or in some sort of budgeting and expenses that you do. You're going to be looking at essentially talking in percentages. Okay, I've kept aside 10% of my income, in terms of, going out on a holiday, on an annual holiday trip with my family this year. Now, you would know what is your annual income. So, for example, if your annual income, essentially, say, for example, 50,000 pounds, and you say I've kept aside 10% of it, then you multiply 50,000 by 10 by 100, or 0.01, you're essentially keeping aside 5,000 pounds for a family holiday. And that is going to be helping you to do your budgeting and allocation in terms of your expenses, because 5,000 will include everything: your air tickets, your flight tickets, your expenses in terms of meals, outings, taxis, your hotel stay, and obviously any shopping or anything that you do towards a holiday. What could be the other type of areas in which we use percentages? I'm pretty sure that a lot of you have bought a house on mortgage, or at some stage in your life, you bought a car or an expensive item on installments. Now, sometimes you need to calculate the percentage, you need to calculate the interest rate on the repayments that you're doing, or the calculation on repayments that you need to do if you take out a loan, or buy something on a credit card, or you take out and get a mortgage. Now in such cases, again, you'd be looking at percentages, because here when we talk about loan interest rates, annualized percentage rate, APR, if you've heard about that, if I mention some of the things as an example, so if I do talk about things like APR, which is annualized percentage rate, you know percentage rate. So what is the interest that you're paying on your mortgage? You're essentially looking at talking about an APR, or an interest rate. And in such cases, when we do talk about, interest rates, or for example, loans in particular, you'd be talking in terms of percentage. So these are places where you would generally see that, we use, annualized, ALLULAL, annualized. Okay. So in this case, you look at talking about in percentage. Now, sometimes you also look at, a popular example that you get to see is in the kitchen, you use percentages. Sometimes you're looking at making following a recipe, but the recipe has not given you the details of the ingredients which have to be put in the, dish. For example, they say take two spoons of this, or two bowls of this, or things like that. But it does not tell you sometimes, or when chefs are essentially talking about recipes and tips, they forget to mention that this particular thing that I'm making is going to be made, this quantity is good enough for two people, or for a serving of four people, things like that. So here again, sometimes when you're adjusting ingredients for a recipe, or basing it on the fact that you're making it for a number of people, you'd always use percentages. So if you say 200 grams of flour would be good enough to serve four people, but if you want to calculate that, okay, if I have to serve six people, or I have friends coming in for lunch or dinner at my house, and we're going to be a total of 10 people, but the recipe suggested 200 grams for four people. So how much would it be for 10 people in order to increase the quantity? So what you look at is, okay, 200 times 200 feeds, say, two people. And if you're looking at 10 people, that would mean 200 times 5, which is about 100 grams will be required to look at feeding 10 people. So again, you'll be adjusting ingredients and quantities based on percentage changes that you would be making. So this is an important topic, because in the exam that you do and sit, you generally have percentages coming up. And in this, what will happen is, the a question will be related to how do you work out percentages of amounts and express that amount as a percentage of another, in terms of, interpretation in general. So when we do talk about percentages, it's a Greek word, as I mentioned to you, and it's come from a Greek phrase called per centrum, which means by the hundreds. This is the symbol, and there are some examples which are given. So 84% means 84 by 100. If you have to represent it as a fraction, you normally, look at it 84 by divided by 100. Now, example, 50% of 100 means how much? 50% of 100 is, half. So if you have to represent 50% as a fraction, you'll go ahead and represent it as 50 by 100, because that is half of whatever share, say, for example, that you're looking at. So when you look at company directors, you open a company and you want you and your partner or your spouse to be a 50% shareholder. What you'll do is you'll issue 100 shares. How many would, if I say 50% is with your wife, how many shares would you give to your wife, and how many would you keep yourself? If you have to express it as a percentage and as a number. So imagine you're opening a new company. The new company, you want joint ownership between you and your missus, and in that you have to issue some shares. How would you issue 50% ownership to yourself, keep with yourself, and 50% give it to your wife or your spouse? So you would use percentage. So I might issue, say, 20 shares, and I would say 10 shares are for my wife and 10 are for me, and that is 50-50% because the total number of shares that you have is 20. And if you have to have a 50% of that, that will be 10. If you issue 100 shares, it'll be 50-50. If you issue 50 shares, it'll be 25-25. If you issue one share, that won't cut it because you can't say zero point 0.5 share and zero point 0.5 share. So you have to issue minimum two shares if you are looking at 50% ownership at both ends. And in such cases, what we'll be doing is we'll be using percentages. Now, that's the first part. The second part is we want to be able to express percentages as an amount, and in sometimes when it is given as an amount, you want to find out what percentage is deductible from that amount, or what that amount is equal to in terms of percentage, vice versa. So percentage, fractions, and decimals is what we covered yesterday, and we looked at ways of how we can convert percentage into a fraction, percentage into a decibel to a fraction to a percentage, a fraction to a decimal, and then a decimal to a fraction, and fraction to a percentage. So today, what we want to be able to understand, continuing with that topic of yesterday, is to understand how do we create or look at equivalence between percentages, fractions, and decimals. Now, there are different ways of representing the three, in terms of one number in three different parts. I can take a number from you and I can put that as a decimal. I can display that or talk about that, or give that number out as a fraction, and then I can convert that number into a percentage. So basically, it's learning how to deal in terms of conversions between decimal, fractions, and percentages. So on the slide, what you see is a table wherein if you had one, say for example, as a number, and you want to express it as a fraction, because anything divided by 1 is 1, but you have to represent it as a fraction, you would basically divide 1 by 1, and that would essentially remain the same original number, which is 1. Now, if you were to express 1 as a percentage, you'll multiply 1 by 100, because what is percentage? As I mentioned to you, it's a fraction of 100. So if you have one share and you own 100% of the shares, even if you have one share in the company and you own 100% of it, that means if you have to represent one, that amount expressed in percentage will become 100%. So if they say that how much of the company do you own, you would not say I own one share in the company. That won't make sense. But if you are the owner of the company or the founder of the company and you say I own 100% of the company, so you see the context in which we are talking actually changes. The value or the number is exactly the same, but the way we express it in the context of when we are talking is going to change, because in this case, I would not say I own one share in the company. Then the next question will be how many shares are in the company. So if you own one, how many shares are in the company? But to avoid that conversation, what you straight away say is that I own 100% of the company. And that means that even if it has one share, you own 100% of it, that is what it allows you to authoritatively and convincingly, in a precise manner, say that you own the company and you're the only director or only, owner of the company in terms of its shares. Similarly, when you look at 0.5, if I have to represent 0.5, it will be 1 by 2, because yesterday when we talked about the decimals being converted into fraction, we looked at if you have a point, you divide and then you put 1, underneath that, and that will become, 1 by 2. So sometimes you look at expressing, and converting percentages to numbers or fractions, and vice versa. That is what you need to understand in today's topic. So if I say 1%, that means 1 out of 100. If I say 50%, that means 50 out of 100 or half. If I say 25%, that means 1/4 or quarter of the 100, which is 25 out of 100. If I say 100%, that means the whole and it is everything. That means I own the company, as an example I gave you. When you say 200%, that means twice the amount. So if you are looking at selling the company, or you're looking at selling something, and you say, okay, I invested this amount of money about 10 years back, and now I expect the money to have doubled, and I would expect 200% of the value of the product. So you would again express that as a percentage, and then the next question could be, how much did you buy the watch at? Say, for example, it was an expensive watch, which is an Omega watch, and you bought it 10 years back. The price for that watch has, increased or, increased over the point in time. and what you say is I expect 200% of the price of what I bought. Then the next question would be how much did you buy it at? So then you would say, okay, I bought it at £2,000. So today's time and the same watch is actually costing, for example, £4,000. So your expectation of getting 200% or twice the amount is actually in line, and you would, obviously be demanding that amount. Now, when we do look at converting, different forms between percentage to fraction, or decimal to percentage, or percentage to decimal, or percentage to fraction, we need to be following certain rules. So the first thing that we want to do is, as a bit of an exercise, find percentages of amount. Now, there are quick mental methods to do this, and sometimes what we have learned is over the years when we've done schooling in year 8, year 9, year 10, we have learned to do the times table, the percentages of numbers, mentally in our mind. So some examples that you look at is sometimes when we do discuss in abstract percentages like numbers and percentages that you're familiar with, it says, I've got I've got 4 children and I'm going to divide my property equally amongst them. So you get the clues from there that you have 4 children and you're going to divide the property equally amongst them. That means each of the child would get 25%. So some of this can be done mentally because you're aware of the numbers. You're aware that you simply divide the whole by the number in which it is going to be distributed, and that would allow you to achieve or arrive at a percentage. So, for example, some workings that you could do as a practice would be to find, say, 5% of an amount. So, what is 5% of 600? So, if I had to do this, what I would do is primarily use a pen and paper. And when I bring out my pen and paper, so if I had to find out, say, for example, 5%, I'll put it this way, of the number 600. How am I going to do that? I know that percentage is 100, right? A fraction of 100. So if I need to find 5% of this, what I would do is multiply 5. Now, if we are talking 5%, that means 5 of 100. So what I'm going to do is divide 5 by 100 and times 600 straight away. So if I need to find out this, 100 times 1, 100 times 6, 6 times 5 is equal to 30. So the 5% of 600 is going to be an amount or a value which is going to be 30. So here the idea of finding an amount or a value basis the percentage of a number, you are going to be multiplying that percentage which is asked for, and divide by 100 times the number. So if we were to look at, say, sometimes as it says here 235, what is 5% of 235? So I'm going to write 235, and then what I'm going to do is 235 times, and I'm going to look at 5%, so 5 by 100. And what I will do is simplify this to the smallest or the simplest fraction which is available. So if I do this, it's 5 times 1 and 5 times 20. So 235 by 20. Again, it is divisible by 5. So this is 5 times 4. And what I will do is divide it here. So 5 fours are 20. You are left with 3. You bring 7 down. 5 sevens are 35. So the answer in terms, if it was asked for in terms of fraction, this would be the answer because this is not further divisible. 47 by 4. If they're asking it in the form of a decimal number, then you'd obviously use the division, which we've done yesterday. So you write 4 here, and then you write 47 here. So what that would come out to be is 4 times 1 is 4. But obviously, you can also do it 10 times. So then this becomes 0. You bring 7 down, and then you do again. So 4 times 1 is 4. 7 minus 4 is 3. And then you put a decimal here in some cases. So essentially what you'll do is you'll bring 1 0 here, and that is how you'll find out the percent. You change the you'll get the amount which is into for a particular number, and you'll basically get that as a percentage of that particular amount. So 11.75 is going to be the number when you convert a percentage or ask for a percentage of a particular number. Now, the other bits that we are going to look at is how do we find, so here we were finding percentages of amount, which are some examples that I've also given. Now, what we want to do is find percentages of amounts, because that is the key part of the topic. Now, we want to look at different situations in which how do we look at finding the percentages of amount. Now, I gave you some examples in the beginning that where do we use percentages? We use percentages in our day-to-day life, which could be, say, for example, in shopping when we are asking for discount. So in such cases, you're looking at finding percentages of amounts for money or money related transactions. That's why you have 30 pounds. You could also have percentages of amount in terms when you're running or when you're looking at distances. So how much have we covered? If I was driving from Manchester to Glasgow and I've been driving at 2 hours, what I would want to find out is how much of distance have I covered in percentage between Manchester to Glasgow. So Manchester to Glasgow, say for example, is 260 miles. What I would do is basically if I've traveled 90 miles and I've reached, say for example, Carlisle, then, or sorry, for example, I've reached, the Lake District, then I'd say, okay, I've roughly done 90 miles and the total distance between my house to Glasgow is 270 miles. So 270 minus 90, that amount essentially is, so 270, 160, and 160 in terms of percentage for an amount that we want to look at, we will look at how many kilometers are left. So in such cases, 160 divided by 270 into 100, you'll get the percentage and that would give you an amount. So percentage is then used in the case of distances when you're traveling. You could also ask for percentages of amounts specifically in the case when you're looking at loans and interest. So this is an example of what is 1% of 56, or if somebody was to ask you a question that I'm paying 4% interest every month, then the next question would be how much are you paying, what is the loan that you've taken out. So you would say, okay, I've taken out a house refurbishment loan for 10,000 pounds. Now if you were taken out a loan for 10,000 pounds, assuming, if I were to do a quick calculation here and assuming that was at 4%, so if I look at 10,000 pounds, that is the loan that I've taken out. So 10,000 here. And what percentage it is taken out at? It is 4%, in terms of the interest that you're paying. So if you want to calculate how much of interest that you're paying on 10,000, so what you'll do is 4% divide 4 by 100 times 10,000 would tell you what is the amount that you are actually paying. Literally, it will not be literally that I'm giving an example, but because it would be a 4% annualized interest rate APR, you are looking at paying 4% every month because it is annualized. So it will be across 12 months. So actual interest rate would be 48% because 4 times 12 months is 48. So, but monthly is what you are wanting to calculate. So I'll cancel out 2 zeros with 2 zeros here. That means your monthly repayments that you're doing at 4% interest is roughly, 400 pounds. So this might just be the interest that you're paying on, say, 10,000, because it is a very high percentage in terms of interest that you're paying. So sometimes when you look at calculating situations like discounts when you're doing shopping, when you're traveling, and you want to look at distance and in terms of percentage, you might be looking at finding percentage converted to an amount. So say for example, you have a log burner at home and you bought 10 bags of logs to burn, but you would say, okay, how many logs are left? Once you've opened the logs up and you put it next to the burner, you would not know how many of them, how many log bags have you used. So what you're going to look at is you roughly know what is the number of bags that you buy, and you know essentially how long they last. So what you'll say is, okay, I think I've got 5 bags left, 50%, roughly we've used 50% of the wood. And in such cases, you're looking at journalizing again, because you know the quantity, you know the usage, or you know exactly how many logs you burn every day or in a week or in a month, and you would probably look at the inventory decreasing and you'd say, okay, now we've got 50% inventory, so we need to reorder. And sometimes you need to look at obviously things like loans and interest. And in some cases, when you look at ingredients, recipes, you look at dieting, fasting, you would say, okay, I need to reduce 50%, of my diet because I need to be in a calorie deficit. Or you might give an example to say that I need to reduce all the fats in my food or 25% of fat in my food in order for me to lose weight and get ready for summer. So in such cases, you're going to be looking at using what is called percentages. And these percentages are going to be expressed as an amount in general when we talk about, because you want the numbers to actually make sense. So you should be able to understand how to convert percentages to amounts, fractions, or decibels. And that would be done by looking at understanding that percentages are nothing but, a fraction of 100. And depending on what is being asked for, if it's been asked for in decibel, you'll obviously divide all the way and go and put the whole number in decibel. If it is being asked for in a fraction, you'll leave it to the lowest possible division that you can get it to, and that would leave it as a fraction. And if you want percentages to be, left as percentages, if they ask other way around, that convert this fraction into percentage, then you'll multiply it by 100, or a decimal number into percentage, then you'll multiply it by 100 to get hold of the amount. And that is basically what you need to remember in today's session, because these are examples wherein you can actually see that we use day-to-day life examples. That is where we see actually the use of percentages in finance, in statistics, in education, in science, in day-to-day shopping, in budgeting, in when you take out a loan, or for example in some cases when you are cooking something, or when you talk about fitness, or any sort of routine which you need to know how much have I covered, how much have I lost, okay, where am I going, how much distance have I covered, or in some cases if I was looking at doing this, then cooking a recipe or looking at following a recipe book, and if it was designed to be this list of ingredients is designed to be able to feed about 4, but if I have 10 people coming, or 15 people coming, or 8 people coming, then how would I increase the quantity? And then you will talk about it in percentages. Is that okay? Is that understood? Any questions on today's session? So what I will do is, if you go on to Moodle, well, what I want to do is basically show whereabouts is this as a topic, given, on Moodle. And there are one or two small activities which are created, and these activities primarily are created so that you can go ahead and revise by doing these activities and see that you've understood the topic today, which is expressing percentages as numbers. So this topic here, percentages of amount, that we've looked at today, after covering fraction, decimals, and percentages yesterday, this is the topic that we've discussed today. There's a knowledge check activity, which is basically an activity that has been put up here, which allows you to check, and the 3-4 activities basically, or tasks in this, actually ask you to cover and calculate a percentage of an amount, then percentage of different types of I would say values, like something in distance, something in terms of value or money, and something in terms of a whole number. And then you can also see that in the question paper that you would appear for, you'd have at least this 100% coming, and it will be carrying 2 marks in the 44 mark paper that you're going to attempt in maths. And obviously in this part of the section, calculator is allowed, so it is easy to deduce the answer, because I'll use the scientific calculator to actually calculate a percentage. But sometimes they ask you to show the workings of how you've come to the calculation, and that is where a pen and paper exercise that I would suggest would be coming in handy, because on the PC, when you write, there'll be a box which will be given, and it'll say, how do you arrived at 35% of 1000 meter, for example, the question given here. So here you need to show that if you multiply 1000 meter into times 35 by 100, that is how you will get the percentage of what is 35%. When you say I'm walking 1000 meters and I've covered 30% or 35% of it, how much meters have you covered? Can you calculate the distance? So what you would do is basically express that as an amount. So 1000 times 35 by 100, and that would say you've covered 350 meters in terms of the total distance being traveled. So my suggestion would be to do this activity, simple activity. You can download this, do this on paper, and then on the second page I've given you the answers as well, so that you are able to confirm whether you've understood this and check your answers to what you have actually attempted. So a simple enough topic which basically looks at expressing percentage as an amount, and that is given, here. This is the presentation. I've not made any changes to it, so I'll leave it like that, and then I can essentially the answers are already given. So my suggestion would be to do this activity. It carries 2 marks, very simple enough. There will be one or two questions related that you would get for 1 mark each, or a question for 2 marks, wherein it'll ask you to show the calculate the answer, but also show the workings of it, and that would mean that you'd be able to get this in your bag and 100% be sure that okay, this is a simple enough question topic, and I should be able to get 100% on this. If it's a 2 mark question, then you should be able to score on that. Any questions, any queries, any doubts? So it is a case of just doing a bit of practice, understanding that percentage means fraction of 100. In some cases, when you're converting a number to a percentage, you'll multiply that by 100. If you're looking at converting it into a fraction, then that percentage is which is given, divide by 100 times the number, and that would help you arrive at a fraction or a decimal in which the answer is asked for. So my suggestion would be to go through this particular small activity and then confirm that you have understood this topic, and that is it for percentages of amount. Is that okay? Any queries, any questions before we close? Right. So if all is okay and all understood, I'll end the session here. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you in the next one next week. So enjoy the rest of your day. And bye for now.
Okay. We have exercise again.
Sorry,
that is all for the day.
That's all for the day today. Yeah. So English we do in the morning 9 to 10, and then maths we do 10:30 to 11:30. So 2 sessions on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. So English we do one day reading, which is for Saturday, and then we do writing on Sunday. So there are 2 sessions, and maths obviously there are lots of topics to cover. As you can see in Moodle, there are 29 topics as per the topic list. So we cover one topic in one session. If I do feel that the topic is small, then I can cover 2 topics in one session, but generally taking you through all the topics so that you are comfortable and you are able to understand, and you can obviously be prepared and pass the test in the first go. So maths is Saturday, Sunday, but different topics on both days. But again, we are looking at a longer topic list as compared to reading, writing.
So can we write the exam after graduation?
These sessions continue throughout the year. So graduation is on the 24th, which is Thursday. But what will happen is, for those of you who essentially end up completing and sitting an exam, you will be having a certificate before that day so that you can receive it, on the graduation day. For those of you who do not end up receiving, are still invited, because you would be partway through your qualification, at least 50%, 75%, because in English, as you know, there are 3 tests: reading, writing, and speaking, listening. So we'll call you in for a speaking, listening test first. Once you have completed that, then you would have had 6 to 8 sessions on reading and writing with me, which takes about 4 weeks to complete and revise. And after that, if you do your test, you should still be able to achieve your English by that date. Maths, obviously, I think I'm going to speed up.
So that means you have to write the exam before the graduation.
Not necessary, no. You can continue and have the exam depending on when you're ready. There is no rush, or there is no urgency. If you aren't feeling that you're ready, these sessions will happen throughout the year. We keep repeating. There'll be new students joining and completing. So we have 400 to 500 students, who do functional skills with us every year. So these sessions happen throughout the year. We are going to give you the sessions and put you onto these session invites till the time you have not achieved your certificate, whether it takes 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, doesn't matter. But we are going to get you through it, and you would keep receiving the invites for these sessions. You'll be asked to join them so that you are able to revise. You are becoming confident. You are understanding the topics, and then when you're ready, you give the exam. But generally speaking, like you're attending with me, our role is to ensure that you are ready to be able to do the test in maximum 8 weeks. And in 8 weeks,
Okay.
we'll cover everything. You'll be feeling confidence yourself that, I know most of it. Yes, there's a
Okay.
difference that if you're looking at achieving 100%, then you have to, put 8 to 12 weeks because you want to cover everything thoroughly. But in some cases, most learners, because you're adult and mature learners, we are doing it for a reason. The minimum pass mark is 55% or 60%, which is equivalent to a C grade. That's why I would suggest that at least it's good to revise and go through with 80% of the topics, because not all topics I'm confident with. Sometimes when I do my test, I might not like diagrams, I might not like graphs or volume or parameter. You might leave certain topics out. But at the end of the day, because there are so much to choose from, as long as you're covering 80%, 85% of it, from that, you will be able to score 60% easily and pass the test in the first go. So that is why I suggest strongly that it's best to do revisions using these sessions, and then at some stage do the practice test from home, as I've shown earlier as well. The tests can also be done for maths from the same website link, and you can do 2 or 3 tests. If you still feel that there are topics that you have not understood, then you can join some of these sessions when they are happening, because each of the sessions are named, and these sessions cover certain topics on certain sessions. So you can, if you find that I'm struggling with diagrams or scatter diagrams or perimeter or volume or whatever, then you can join that session and ask me questions, and we can do exercises or take up examples to be able to clarify those doubts so that you're confident that this is a topic you understand. And then is when I would suggest you do your test.
Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Any other questions, anybody else? Okay, so enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon, and I will catch up with you next week. Thanks, and I will send you the
Thank
copy of the
you.
recording in the WhatsApp group in a couple of seconds after the session.
All right.